Okay, so now I have all of my parts. Got several of these to make a go of this, so I will not run out anytime soon. I know the number of these pieces I need from the first layer is going to be 7. So 2, 4, so I need 1 more of these. So that's what I have. What I'm going to start with is just 3. 3 to start is more than enough to get me to where I want to be. I think the thing that makes the biggest impact is a glue roller. Instead of squeezing out a tube of glue, I think that's a disaster. So what I'll do here to start, and there's probably loads of reasons why I shouldn't do this, but I always like to hit at least one of the end grain pieces just to give it a little bit more tackiness, especially on the first 3. Rolling this out makes it so much easier. It also helps to distribute the right amount or a good amount of glue. Alright, so I'm just going to walk this around a little bit, have that glue start to set up. Suppose that if you are going to cut off a radius here, you could start pinning these with some type of a brad nail just to hold it in place, and then you could apply the pressure. Probably not a horrible idea. Alright, so I'm being very careful to align these little horns or these corners, and I'm also trying to center the second row to where the joint is on the first row. Once I've got that, then I just need a little bit of clamping pressure. When starting, I think it's really easy to overdo it with how much pressure you need on this. And if I start coming in with a lot of pressure, it's going to be very easy to have the second row start to slide and walk, that cold creep with glue ups. So getting that to start, that's great. Now time for second row. You're going to find you're going to use just about every clamp that you have in order to do this. And these little F clamps I think are best suited for this task. C clamps will probably work depending on how tall they are, how large the throat is. So that's to get a little bit of opening here. What I want to do is slide or angle this clamp so as I tighten it, it'll actually pull this first row back in to close up that joint. If I have a little bit opening here, not the end of the world, I am planning on veneering all this after it's dried. But if you're not going to veneer, then this becomes far more critical. I'm only applying adhesive on about half of this thing. Oops, I did the wrong half, sadly. Not to worry. Sometimes when I work and I talk, I find that I end up doing or saying things that I shouldn't. Alright, so that one pulled that joint apart, which is not great. So you hit this point where there's so much of this glue surface area that's a little bit slick right now, and it's going to start walking and moving on you if you're not careful. So at this point you could do 2 things. You could either take a little break from this, let that set, and then do something else. Once this has been in for 15, maybe 20 minutes, then you could start building up again. Because I have wet glue here, I do want to finish up at least this one. We had talked briefly before about the width of these pieces being somewhat unimportant. The part that is critical is the thickness of all of these pieces. If I were to mill these up in two different batches, I would have a different thickness on this piece, different thickness on that one. Then none of these are going to align, and I'm either going to have to run this over a jointer, send it through the planer potentially to get these leveled, and then start redoing these. To outsmart all of that, I just milled them all at the same time to the same thickness, and then it doesn't matter the sequence or order that I started hearing this. Alright, I've got some more wet glue under here. Alright, this is going to be my last one. Yeah, I'm going to use you. You'll notice I'm also alternating my clamps. So some clamps are towards the interior of the curve, some are on the exterior, and that helps to balance it. If all the clamps are on one side or the other, it starts to tip, and then you're fighting individual pieces of this material, as well as the balancing of the whole thing. Okay, so I can continue to do 2 rows all the way across to get my full width, but at this point I've got enough pieces in place that I can start going back to where I started. Alright, so if I started somewhere in the center here, I'm going to briefly take the clamps off. That glue is still wet. This is actual time. There's no delay in the recording here. So put that one into place, and then get clamps back onto it again. And I can continue that process and continue to build up the thickness or the layers of this as much as I like. It's a good way to maximize the number of clamps that you do have, is instead of clamping horizontally, I'm just clamping vertically, and then I could still use the same clamps to clamp up that first and second row, now a third, and then possibly a fourth, and just kind of working your way out from there. Anyway, this is the process. I'll continue to do this horizontally, as I said, and then vertically up until I meet or match my apron width, which I think is going to be around 6.5, almost 7 inches wide.